Hello.
Welcome to the Studio Meala podcast, everybody. How are you, Owen?
Good. Very excited about this one.
This one's gonna be good. I know a lot of other people are excited about this. I think a lot of the crew here at Studio Meala are big fans of this particular guest. So,
Would it be hyperbolic to say that our guest today is one of the best animators in the world working today? I don't think so.
I put him on a pretty high pedestal. And
Spencer
so was everyone
Juan.
else who was on the podcast. Everyone else was also the best animator in the world.
Yes, of course.
Our guest today is Spencer Juan. Have you heard of him?
I have, because Spencer Juan has worked on Hyper Light Breaker, Hades 2, The Owl House, Castlevania, Into the Spider-Verse, and the Invader Zim movie. That's just a couple of the things. Folks, you've seen Spencer Juan's work, and you've been impressed by it. Maybe you didn't know it was Spencer Juan's work.
You can also find Spencer's work at Studio Grackle on Twitter or YouTube or whatever. I'm sure he'll tell us the details in the recording, but he is the founder of Studio Grackle, and that Hades trailer that we talked about a second ago, I think that was their first project. Any other details about Spencer we need to go over?
No.
No.
Okay,
No. Do you want to just tell us a bit about yourself and Studio Grackle and...
About myself, okay. This never goes super well, but here we go. Okay, so I'm Spencer Juan. I'm an animator and the owner of Studio Grackle. I used to work as a director and animation supervisor, animation director, etc. in Los Angeles, and now since the pandemic, I have owned my own business. What else is there to say about that? I don't think very much, right?
Well, apart from you melted everyone's hearts with that one shot of
Zagreus?
yeah, running blood through his hair. I'm sure Owen's got a lot to say about that.
Well, funnily enough, this was something I was thinking of I was gonna save to the end, but let's get right into that shot. I have to ask, are you personally responsible for the shot of Zagreus running his hand through his hair?
Yeah, it's funny. At the time when we were making that project, I tried to get literally anyone else to take that scene. I was so busy, and I really, really, really didn't want to do it. And no one would, so I ended up taking it. Yeah, I drew it.
How does it feel to be personally responsible for the sexiest bit of animation ever done?
Oh, come on, that cannot be the sexiest bit of animation ever done.
Maybe the sexiest bit of official. I don't know. I don't know how much of my hand
animation
to reveal here.
Honestly, I didn't really think anything of it when I was drawing it. This basically always happens too. It's the things you don't think about are the things that people gravitate to, right?
Very true.
That's the perfect answer.
Yeah. I was thinking man, these I really wish that I hadn't put 3 skull dogs moving on the shoulder. It was a tracking nightmare.
That's the bit on the 5th watch of that loop where you go, oh god, that's an awful lot of stuff to animate.
Yeah. It was funny because when I was designing the character for animation, Jen was giving me so much shit. Jen Z, the art director at Super, she was giving me so much shit. Can I say shit on this podcast?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. She was giving me so much shit about not putting a nipple on the character. She was like, why is everyone afraid of nipples? Why do all these animated characters not have nipples? I need you to put the nipple on the model, Spencer. And then one of the animators from Japan also neglected to draw the nipple, and she was like, why do you animators fear nipples? Why are you also afraid of nipples? It was so fun. That's the most time I've ever said nipples in one
I mean, we're about to say a lot more because that I've never had an opportunity to go into this tangent, but I'll eventually get this show made. But I've got a show with 2 big guys who are always topless. They're just big, huge, screaming guys. I've always drawn really detailed, nipples on them, and I just wanna. It just cracks me up to think I'll never get to do this unless I can get this show made myself.
Maybe 2023 will be the year that we get just really detailed nipple animation.
Yeah.
Once you get into the kind of boring, like when you're drawing your 40th frame of these topless guys, keeping them always in the right spot, it's almost like the pupil problem, but making sure they're the consistent size. I can't see it being like the fifth finger, something that animators just go, we can't see them. They're small.
No one's gonna notice.
Yeah, no, you got to make sure that the nipples are always making eye contact with the viewer.
So, is there a chance that nipples are the sixth finger in animation?
Yeah, exactly.
So we need some variant of like the Mickey Mouse glove, but for the male nipples. Maybe that's a shirt. Homer Simpson's shirt.
I'm glad this is where we've gone this early with the podcast, and you've got your podcast title already.
Well, it's early for me, so
yeah, Spencer, your episode is going to be titled "Nipples."
I'm totally fine with that.
Like, I'm desperately looking down at my notes for like somebody to wrangle us back to.
I'm sorry.
What were your influences, and how did they come through in your work? That's the sound of a train clanking right back onto the rails.
My influences. So I was originally the guy who got me to notice animation in the first place was this animator, Noria Matsumoto. I was watching an episode of Naruto, as you do when you're a middle schooler, an edgy middle schooler. And I noticed for the first time that the animation looked really different than what I was used to. Like, I'd grown up watching Miyazaki movies, but the quality of Miyazaki movies is consistent.
Yeah.
When you watch Naruto and suddenly, like, animator Noria Matsumoto, like, busts out with this insane-ass episode where he draws so much of it by himself, you're like, something is off here. Like, something looks really different here, but I don't have the vocabulary for it. And that's what got me to really think about the fact that, like, animation has a lot going on in it. I didn't even really make the connection that like one person had drawn that at the time.
Yeah.
But I would say that he was like really my first influence. And then as I got older and I got into animation and learned that the scenes that I loved were the work of like single people.
Yeah.
Just working a lot. I got really into this animator Toshiyuki Inoue, who's like very famous animator in Japan. Very like realistic, consistent, but like not in a way where like it doesn't look like an animated character. I think that's the most impressive thing about his work. And I would get like really into like Takeshi Honda, like a lot of the animators like around that kind of field of like really weighty, realistic work, but like in a way that doesn't sabotage the fact that it's an animated character. And I think that like those influences have really like carried on for me to this day. Like that is still the type of work that like I strive to create for myself and for the studio, but light years away from those people.
That's really consistent though, because I mean I would have always described your work as like, yeah, an anime has a bit where it's just suddenly incredible. And you, like Studio Grackle, I guess, I suppose you focus on mostly short form stuff, right? Or so far anyway, like pretty bite-sized projects like game trailers and intros and things like that. I guess, do they really allow you to kind of focus in that style specifically, or? Well,
I tend to pick clients that I think are going to like, give us an amount of freedom if I can.
Yeah.
And Supergiant's been like fantastic to work with. I think the entire time that we've worked with them, they've given us like 5 notes.
Wow.
Yeah, one was nipples. Just to get back on the nipple tangent.
Let's get back on track here, yeah.
Let's get right back on track of what this podcast is actually
making
supposed
sure
to be.
that I have no opportunity to edit any of that out. Just keep.
But yeah, no, like all the clients we've worked with so far have been like really good about giving us like just like the freedom and space that we need to experiment and to make work. I've spent a lot of my career being strangled by different supervisors, different executives.
Yeah.
My work on the Owl House in particular, if I'm being honest,
Sure.
never really turned out the way it was supposed to. So,
and that was, I'm aware you worked pretty heavily on the opening sequence. Was there much in the episodes that you worked on yourself, or?
Yeah, there were a few sequences. I animated like actually one of the first scenes that appears in the show where the character is just giving some monologue to a snake and then shoots a like a fireball out of her like bazooka staff. I animated like a lot of the fight scenes in season 1. I ended up leaving the show before season 2, but yeah, my animation is kind of on that show scattered out scene by scene for the most part, except for, you know, like the 2 fight scenes with like the 2 witch sisters, Ida and Lilith.
Yeah.
And there were differing amounts of time that I got to work on all those things. And and then the dance scene in Grom. Like, I storyboarded that, but then I animated some of the scenes in it. I never posted most of that work because it was so unfinished.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I only posted the ones that I finished. I feel really bad when I can't finish my work. If there are times when I can't finish my work, I feel like that's like the most shameful thing that an animator can do. Like, unless I'm passing full like key animation where I've handed almost everything to the cleanup artists in like South Korea, I basically have a mental breakdown about that. Like, it is the worst feeling, I swear.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
Is it true that Studio Grackle was created out of necessity for a job? I thought I read something along those lines.
Yeah, it's true. Basically what happened is I had just started Spider-Verse and I wasn't super busy yet, and Gen Z came to me specifically, like Spencer Juan, the individual, not Spencer Juan, the business entity, and asked if I'd be interested in making this trailer, but at the time there was like this bill in California, California Assembly Bill 5, which, like, I think the intention of it was to keep companies from taking advantage of contractors, but you know, I'm really not an expert in the legality of any of this. All I know is that one of the byproducts of the way that bill was worded is that I could not work with Supergiant as a contractor. And so I had to create a business entity in order to work with them. And so, like, for all intents and purposes, I was starting a shell company. And I just decided that I liked the shell company. And so the shell company became a real company.
Wow, what a way to go.
I know.
You mentioned feeling unhappy when you don't feel like your work has been completed. Your work, it's so dynamic and action oriented that how do you know when you've pushed it far enough without going too far, or like how do you know when to say that's as far as I'm pushing it, and what's that cutoff point for you look like?
Man, that is such a difficult question to answer. It's an interesting question, but I've never been asked anything like this before. I don't know if I've ever really thought about it. I mean, I know for me personally, like, animation for me is becoming a lot like math these days. With my timing and my process, there's a lot there to reference from how I've worked before. And I kind of ran into this weird situation when we were working on the Hades trailer, the second Hades trailer, that I've never talked about before. But when I was animating that first scene in the trailer, even though the characters were so far away and, like, you can get away with, like, such a limited drawing count when things are that small on screen, my brain kept telling me to put it on ones. And the project was at 30 frames per second, so ones should have been absolutely out of the question.
Yeah.
But it's like I could still see strobing even then, and my eyes had never sabotaged me in that way before. So I had to force myself to put it in my usual timing. And now I wonder if this is just like something that animators experience as they get older. Like, I've never had a mentor or anything, though most of the animators in America were more or less done working by the time I entered this industry, you know, like the older ones, and I've never met any of them, so there's no one to ask. But it kind of feels like that, like, Richard Williams thing where, like, he insisted on putting, like, everything on ones. I'm like, was that like a specifically him thing, or is that just something that happens to your brain when you grow old in this industry? I'm just, like, rambling now about something you didn't ask about, but
well, no, this is really interesting, because, like, I wonder if that, like, the opposite's happening to me, but I wonder if I'm approaching that because, like, in college I was all on ones, on twos. I'm in a stage of my life where I'm just like, oh god, I love just animating stuff on sixes now. I don't want to move back. But I wonder if that's just going to start closing down again until
I
all-
don't know.
7 years old. I'm animating at 60 frames per second on. I mean, actually, Richard Williams, was it Richard Williams, whose the final project he was working on was like this basically photorealistic,
like gladiator looking thing.
yeah,
I can't remember
which just
the name
seems
of
like
it.
the most extreme version of that, where it's like I'm doing it all in ones, and every frame is literally I'm just drawing a photograph from scratch.
Yeah.
So maybe it is a thing.
God, I don't know. You know, it was one of the animators that works with us, Tam Lu. He was we were actually talking about this a while ago, and he was talking about how like he really respects some of the animators from Japan who have like changed their styles over the years, and like the way he worded it, which I thought was frankly kind of genius, was I really respect them for at this age still finding things to be curious about in animation. And like I have never like heard such a profound way of putting that one particular thing.
Yeah.
Like I look specifically at animators like Yutaka Nakamura, who used to do a lot more like detailed, like grounded, more like realistic work, and there was like a lot of flair to it too. But like these days it's kind of just like things zooming around on screen. It's like, how far can I push the perspective of these buildings being twisted in like every which way? And like his work has changed a ton over the years, and like people feel differently about that, right?
I think what's good about that is that it maintains that feeling, like when it maintains a feeling that like that animator felt like they were kind of playing with toys in a way. You know, when you're a kid and you're holding toys at different perspectives in your eye, and you're just playing with perspective in your own, just using your own eyes. And when there's consistent new explorations of that from an animator, you can tell that like they're staying curious the whole way through. Like they've stopped just relying on a formula, or maybe like they get so good at a certain approach that it kind of becomes uninteresting to them, and like the exciting part is kind of breaking the rules a bit and doing something different.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I think that's exactly it. And I personally have like struggled with that a lot in my career, and now I really, really sincerely hope that my brain wanting to put everything on ones is not my way of staying curious about animation.
I was gonna say, like, when on that question of when you know you've finished a shot, I guess if you've got like an unspoken formula in your head, I guess it probably just feels right when you've hit it, and it's probably hard to articulate.
Yeah,
otherwise.
I mean, and it depends on the project, right? You know, some projects I need to draw more detail than others. There was a time where I was drawing too detailed, and I had to sort of scale everything back. So if you look at my work, like just post Castlevania, there's like too much detail in it. It actually gets like a little bit muddy. And then if you look at it afterward, I start taking inspiration from actually like the younger animators that are coming up under me, who are still like, will fully make a drawing of a character that's just like in the in-between, it's a blob, and it's like, man, I forgot how to do that. I need to learn how to do that again. And I guess that was my way of like staying curious at the time. And these days we're juggling so many things at once. I feel like I'm being pulled in a lot of directions.
It's fun hearing like what certain animators learn from each other, and what they started with, especially these days with people who largely got started online and didn't necessarily have a traditional education in animation or whatever. You get a lot more people who just start off with detail and they get really good at it, and they need to break away from it later on. I'm kind of probably like one of those guys you mentioned where like I was basically drawing smear frames exclusively from the start. I don't think I ever drew a detailed character, and that's something I feel like I struggle with now. I need to solidify and like draw a normal looking guy, but like I can't not make him be like bleh. Like I'm just drawing that weird Sasuke frame constantly.
But we love that weird Sasuke frame.
Yeah. When it's the only thing you do, sometimes you need a little bit of rigidity to put some context on it, but it's always interesting to hear like what people feel like they're missing, you know.
On the weird Sasuke frame, I think it's really nice to hear Naruto, of all things, getting a shout out for those amazing animation sequences, because it's not something that I often hear people talk about, but there's definitely like a collective shared memory of, do you remember when Naruto just went fucking wild? Like, because that was definitely eye-opening for a lot of people, because Naruto was one of those shonens that, you know, you could sit through 100 episodes of really not particularly interesting animation that, you know, manga adaptation,
Yeah.
flapping mouths, not a lot happening. But then, to see how exciting it could get, that seems like quite a common thing now to do we're doing the anime action scene bit, and it's okay that it looks different from the rest of it because we're kind of leaning into that. But that stark difference that you mentioned earlier, I don't feel like you saw that a lot before that. I think Naruto was one of the first times people saw that. It's like, oh, you can have both, even if even if everyone's going to notice.
That's a good point, actually, because even with stuff like Dragon Ball, or even Evangelion's a shorter running thing, even though there is the balance of like limited and fuller animation, there was a kind of a consistency to it that made everything seem kind of evenly spread. And like, yeah, I don't think it was until like something like Naruto where you got just the extreme, like, this is just a different show for 30 seconds, and like it works, and people started pushing that a little bit more, and yeah, just exploring what you get away with. Because even when you look at I'm not the biggest fan of Dragon Ball Super, but the difference in what they do now, and like when they decide they want to have a pop-off thing, it looks like insanity in a really good way. Yeah, I think you're right. Naruto might have been a key.
It was definitely one of the earlier ones. Although, like, Noria Matsumoto did also do something very similar to that in Hunter x Hunter. Like, the original Hunter x Hunter, not the new Hunter x Hunter. And now the entire internet knows that I say the title of that show without pronouncing the X, because someone told me to do that once.
There's a laser sight on you now.
Do you think it's Hunter x Hunter or Hunter x Hunter?
I've always said Hunter x Hunter, but that's only because I've heard other people say Hunter x Hunter before I heard people say Hunter x Hunter.
And comment on this episode if you think it should be pronounced differently.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, most anime fans don't know a single name of like a single animator, right? It's just that little community of people that got really into Japanese animation that was just really starting up as I was getting into college.
Yeah.
Do you remember back in those days, like when you had to look for those scenes specifically in the episodes, and now we just have an entire website for it? Like, that's so great.
Yeah, that's wild. It's one of those things where I still... Again, I'm still not fully used to knowing I can just go on browse Sakugaburu and just pull up basically anything, because I think I also just missed the window on that being a resource while I was in college or when I was studying. And I always think about people now, like people who are like 15 who go, I'm going to start learning animation, and their first step is referencing Sakugaburu stuff, and like you're getting insane talent so fast now.
What a wellspring of like information that you can just pull from instantly now. It was so hard to find this stuff when I was younger, and it was even harder for like the generation of animators that came before me. Like, I can't imagine how Peter Chung used to like find his stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, because you know that he referenced a lot of these different animators, but like he probably had to like rip it off of like a VHS.
Well, I mean, a lot of back in college, a lot of like the teachers there who used to like work at Bluth and stuff would talk about how their reference practice material was usually just to like put on a movie and like just pause it every now and then, and just draw the frame and then skip ahead a frame and do that, because that was the easiest way to access it, you know?
God, wouldn't it be so cool though to like put together one of those like anime music videos, but like dedicated to a single animator, but you did it by like taping VHS tapes together?
Ooh, that would look nice. It would have that nice VHS warmth.
A nice fuzz. Working on things like Hades 2, Spider-Verse 2, the Invader Zim movie, Castlevania, these are all things that you know they're going to be seen by a lot of people. Does that make you nervous or excited? Does that help or hinder while you're working on them?
You know, I guess it really depended on the project. I definitely got really inside my own head when it came to Spider-Verse. It felt like every single week I had to one-up myself or I wasn't doing my job. But apparently that's just what working in feature feels like to a lot of people. So
okay.
Invader Zim, I remember having a really hard time pinning down something that Jonan wanted specifically, but I wasn't really thinking about people seeing it. I was just really trying to do my job, and there like wasn't really a lot of guidelines for what this thing was supposed to look like. And when Jake Wyatt drew the storyboards, he drew them using the proportions of the normal characters, and so I had to go and re-storyboard the whole thing to make it fit for realistic characters.
So you got like most of a sequence in the regular style, and you just had to.
He handed me those storyboards, and I had to somehow make it work with like a muscular adult realistic man.
That's so funny. That's a hilarious way to look at it. It kind of, in the context of like the lore of it, you can almost imagine it being like Zim drawing himself a certain way, and you just get the mirror comparisons in the storyboards of how he actually looks.
Oh yeah, no, it's exactly what they were aiming for with the sequence too. But then when we had actually came time to make it, I was like, hi, I can't really use these because everything is gonna be weird if I do. Like his head will go off the top of the screen if I put him in this staging, but if I shrink him down, it'll sabotage the staging. So we kind of had to just like rethink it. For Hades 2 though, we already had the benefit of making Hades 1, so I knew what it was supposed to be, and I knew things that I wanted to do better than I did last time. Like, I did not think that we really nailed the style of the video games. Like, I don't know if anyone noticed this, but we entirely abandoned the second shadow that was on Zagreus' face before. I was trying to do something that kind of mimicked the way that the painted style of the video game looked, but the style of the game changed to become... Like, if you look at Jen's illustrations, like, she's moving away from the double shadow thing, and I desperately wanted to move away from it as well.
Yeah.
And we, like, upped the black shadows. There's, like, there's much more care given to, like, the way the shadows fall on, like, Mel's face. And
so the styles of the game and your end of it are starting to merge a little more?
Starting to merge a little... Well, because I just didn't think we... did it justice the first time. Like we tried our best, but I'd never worked in that style before, and like we did a great job. The animators specifically like did a great job. It was me, the designer, who like I didn't think I nailed it. And this happens when you go from like season 1 of television to season 2 of television as well. The benefit is that you get a chance to revisit the model sheets. Yeah. And there's always something in those model sheets that wasn't good. Like, anytime you make a first model sheet, it's not going to be good. You have to make discoveries about the characters as you're working. And then like, shorthands that you can use, different shapes that look better on the character. And you can revisit the model sheet and make a much better model sheet.
Owen and I were talking about this recently, where, like, there's kind of two things that can happen with, like, season 2 or, like, future season model sheets. And one of them is... everyone getting the second chance to like nail it the way they wanted to the first time, or the first season was like our model sheets then were we were just trying to get the show made and approved, but now that we're an established show we can just do whatever the hell we want with them. So that's why you get this amazing stuff where in Dexter's lab, Dexter every season is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller because that's the way the animators enjoy drawing him. And I can imagine there was a point where like if they sent it, like if they submitted model sheets of that, they would have been like, this show looks weird and stupid. And the best one, which Owen pointed out, was Dee Dee's head being so big and her body being literally like 2 pixels. Like, it's the tiniest thing. It's so good. I love watching a progression of like in each season how people progress. But like, yeah, that's an interesting one of just like that kind of quality jump as far as the animators are concerned, that like we feel like that first season was a practice run now and we can nail it this time.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, if I were making an entire season of this, the model sheets would not look like this. They are so detailed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you mentioning that you decided to go further on the black shadows in Hades 2, because boy did you go further with the black shadows in Hades 2. It's like you started off basically, isn't it the first 2 shots that are basically pitch black and you're only seeing them in the flashes of the impact?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's a big, like entire characters just completely in darkness. What a bold way to start the trailer.
Yeah, it was, honestly, like I wanted to try something a little bit different than we'd done before too, and the script that Greg handed me kind of suggested that maybe I could get away with just like I think the way I pitched it to Supergiant was like, I want the characters to be entirely obscured by shadow in a totally different style than they appear normally, and every glowing thing on them just kind of is like a glow stick, and that's what I want it to look like.
That's amazing.
Yeah. They fought me a little bit on there's like once, and it did get a little bit dark, but like scene 6 where they're just kind of going at it, but they're closer to the camera now. That's one that I drew, and I made it so I like made the compositor go so dark on it, and Jen was like, well, it's a little too dark now. And I was like, I was like, I think you're right, actually, but this scene crashed my compositor's computer 8 times, and we just managed to get it to export. Yeah. Yeah, After Effects got buggy this last year. Sorry.
We've got a couple of questions from Twitter, which is we've come this far without ever actually doing that. I'm sorry, listeners, that we've never relied on you before, but we'll see how you did, and if you guys sent in terrible questions, we'll stop asking. We're being very tsundere about how we ask for questions, because we just said we might answer them, maybe, if you're good. So Jesse Centers asks, what's the hardest action scene you had to board? And what new skill / hack did you learn to help you overcome that hurdle?
You know, I don't think I have an example for the hardest one, but there was this time on the Owl House where when I was, you know, I don't think I ever mentioned this on the internet, but the fight scene between Ida and Lilith, I also ended up like revising the storyboards on at Dana's request. She didn't think that there was like enough punch to it, and a few different storyboard artists had taken a crack at it beforehand, and they were complaining because like at the time they were trying to limit the number of backgrounds used in the show, because we were going like background crazy and the show was getting too expensive. Mm-hmm. And the storyboard artists were like complaining to me. They were like, well, we can't make an interesting action scene like if we're like so limited on backgrounds. And I was like, no, I think there's like ways you can do this. And so if you look very closely at that scene in the show, I reused the same background I think 13 times.
Nice.
Yeah, I made one really big background, and I took it to the background designer. I was like, I needed to be at this resolution. It was Steven Sugar. I said background designer. He was the lead background artist, but I took it to Steven, and I was like, I need this to be like this resolution. Like, here's a picture of a normal, like, a 1920 by 1080 screen on this. Like, it needs to be this exact size. It cannot be smaller. And you just see different parts of that background appear over and over and over again. And I'm sure that like people have figured this out in storyboard before. Like I'm sure that like this is like just a technique that people have used in the past, but like I'd never heard of it, and so I was kind of calling it Big Battlefield to myself because I played a lot of Smash Bros at the time.
That's incredible. I'm gonna start using that for like our default canvas sizes, just regular Battlefield, Big Battlefield, Final Destination. Yeah. That's a cool one. We got to start doing more. Just making one giant background that technically on the list counts as one background.
Yeah, it's kind of like an establishing shot but backward.
Yeah,
the one you dump some effort into and then you just use it over and over again.
The other one is like you can, if you need to get some further use out of one of those backgrounds as well. It's like just put focus blur on it and you can use it about 40 more times. Yeah, flip it. Put it upside down.
That was one of the things that I really liked about the Hades 2 trailer too, was that we just like for the entire skyline we only had to make like a few trees, and then we could keep reusing trees and just like make it black this time, like make it in full light this time. This time a flash will hit it and it doesn't look like the same tree anymore.
Nen asks, what's something you wish you could tell your younger self regarding pursuing this career? Which is a pretty big one, but I think this could come into how you'd approach some of your older projects now, maybe.
I don't even think it would have to do with the projects, but there was this this one night I was working late at Disney, like late, and I got accosted by a security guard while I was outside smoking. He was like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "I work here." And he was like, "Where's your badge?" And I was like, okay, I'll give you my badge. Let's go back to my office. And it was kind of like my little like, fuck you, like I'm God powerful, but like, you know, his tone changed immediately the moment he realized that I was like a supervisor on the show, and I was pissed at the time, and I remember him saying to me, like, there's a whole world out there. And I was like, yeah, I've got a job to do. And now I'm, a few years out from that. I think, God, it's actually been over 5 years. I cannot believe that. But I am just really now learning how to function as like a human in society. And I neglected that entire like part of just like my basic humanity. Because I only viewed myself as like an animator, and I figured for a long time, like, as long as my career was going okay, like my life would be going okay.
Yeah.
And now it's just like I'm realizing like just like how much I've been missing, and like how I really, really needed to work on like balancing myself out. And how like at the end of the day, if I like, maybe I don't draw every single in between and I have to delegate that, or maybe the animation isn't the exact perfect thing that I had in my head, but like that means I got to sleep and like take care of my body.
Yeah.
And like I wish I'd known that when I was younger. And I see a lot of the younger animators, like the ones who like grew up seeing things like Castlevania, and they're like working themselves to the bone exactly the way that I did, and it honestly is troubling for me. And like I wish they wouldn't do that to themselves, and I wish that companies were not like trying to take advantage of them in that way. It like specifically the animation industry, especially the anime industry, not the animation industry. But
I think it applies to like animation in general too, though. That's a sadly common one in terms of like looking back, that I think comes up quite a bit. And like, I mean, it was definitely something we got in college as well, where like there was always this attitude, even from either workshop or lectures, things of this kind of just, you just got to grind. This idea that you had to be like, you've got to be the absolute best animator before like you're even doing a bouncing ball.
Yeah.
And like this weird promotion of like grind, you just got to work and like be the first. What was the thing that you'd hear people saying, like, you got to be the first one in and the last one to leave? Like that being a part of the lesson in college just seemed like such a toxic thing to tell really young people. And it is specifically tied to animation. Well, I'm sure it happens with a lot of other stuff, but because animation is something that you can't really leave at the door. Like you take it home with you because the reason you're into it is because you like to draw. Naturally people define themselves by it, so they're happy to go, oh yeah, I'll go home and I'll animate this evening. And I think doing a little bit of that every now and then is okay if you've got a bit of that passion and drive, especially when you're kind of young and learning. But I really think it's got to be talked about with like a pinch of salt at an earlier stage. Like I try to tell, whenever we do like college talks, I always try to tell students, like, don't define yourself as an animator. Just define yourself as a person who really enjoys animating. But like, there's a danger with defining yourself as an animator where you'll find yourself in these situations where you've almost worked yourself to death, and you justify it because you go, well, I'm an animator, so that's what I do. I was like, do some other stuff, go to bed, and make some dinner.
Also, if you're defining yourself like that, and the animation isn't going well, either because you don't feel you're hitting a standard that you've told yourself you need to hit, or if you're having trouble finding work in that field, or like for whatever reason that it's not feeling like it's going well, and you've told yourself that's what I am, then you are going to feel like you are an utter failure. It's like, I'm not doing the thing that I am, so like what's left? Is like, if you have made yourself like worked on yourself being like more well-rounded and seeing animation as a part of you, then it's a lot easier to have the perspective to say, that's not going well at the moment, but that's okay. That is not evidence of me being a failure. There's just something to work on.
The one thing I always try to remind people of is like, everyone looks up to Miyazaki, but also just keep in mind, like, he's not any happier than you. Like, look at any footage of him, as like, you don't have, like, working to that standard And it's great if you can hit that and you're happy with yourself and you can progress naturally. That's fantastic. But like, yeah, working yourself to death to hit that standard isn't going to make you feel better about yourself. You'll be at a stage where you might be a lot better, but yeah, it might not be worth the time. So I like, if you asked me that same question, I'd probably say the same thing, because like I did a lot of late nights in college, and like I definitely feel unhealthier than I did before. Really practicing for a long time.
Oh, I've certainly done like irreparable damage to my body by working the way that I did for my early career. My entire left palm went numb when I was younger, and I just like never went to a hospital about it.
Spencer, it's been fantastic chatting to you. Do you have any little things you want to plug, or any? I guess just Studio Grackle.
God, yeah. So, my studio is called Grackle. I'm not even sure if I said that once this episode, but the studio that I run is called Studio Grackle. We have Twitter, Instagram, TikTok banned our account, and so we're not on TikTok anymore. And we have a website if you'd like to contact us about projects. It's studiograckle.com, and at Studio Grackle for basically everything else.
Beautiful. We don't have to leave this in the podcast. Why did you get banned from TikTok?
They accused us of impersonating ourselves.
Oh yeah,
that's disappointing. I was sure that the answer was actually going to be nipples.
No, like
it was going to bring the whole podcast to a beautiful.
They literally accused us of impersonating ourselves, suspended our account without telling us, and then when we appealed through the weird backdoor route you can use, they just said you're not this company, and they did it 3 times. So we can't get on TikTok anymore. It's fine. TikTok sucks anyway.
I was gonna say we've got a TikTok with like 30 followers because we never post on it. So everybody follow us on TikTok.
It's a terrible format for animation. It's a terrible format for animation.
It's funny because we often have a thing where like, cool, we've made all these videos. It's like, oh, we've done this in 1920 by 1080, making a portrait version of it. Oh, we can't fit anything in, and now we've got to move the camera around to show off all the stuff, and then it's trying to find time to animate stuff with portrait. But anyway, follow us on TikTok.